Thank you, Colin.
Welcome, absolutely.
Okay. All right, but first, let me take a selfie. So you're all going to be in it. I want you to put your hands up, do some corporate hands. Woo, woo, woo! Yay, okay, thanks. Sorry, I have a marketing team at home who was pretty insistent that, that there be a selfie involved here somehow, so there you have it. Thank you very much for joining today. I am very passionate about what I'm going to tell you about today, so I will probably run out to the limit of my time, and if that's the case, my apologies. I'll be in the networking, I'll be around. If you have questions, if we don't get there, feel free to ask. So I'm Nanci Meadows. I am the People Champ for Dynamic Events and Hub. Dynamic Events is a corporate event planning service company. Hub is a software solution company for events. And I joined that company when it was just one, about 4 years ago. And the leadership team, I and 3 others, had this dilemma in front of us. The company was smaller, but it frankly had a very toxic environment. It was growing, it was getting to be fast, and we were presented with this challenge of how are we going to move forward successfully, the 4 of us having to manage all of this basic toxicity and high turnover and just lots of drama, basically. So we employed this tactic that we had learned from a trainer. His name was Chalmers Brothers. He was a communications guy, and he told us about this tool, and it's called the Big I. And basically what that means is you pull yourself up above a situation, whatever circumstance you're in, and you look down on it very objectively, as if you're this big eye in the sky. No emotion involved, just the facts. What do you see? And we decided to do this with business. Like, how is business operated, and particularly in regard to people? And what we found when we looked down objectively is that businesses on a regular basis pick key individuals and place them into roles. Now, these are people that they identify based on those persons' resumes or even just their life experience, people who really nail it. I mean, they manage everything well. They're the rock stars, and they're like, yes, there's our panacea, that's the guy we need, that's who we want on our team. They hire the person, and then that same rock star individual walking through the doors of the business is expected to drop that backpack of responsibility at the door. This is standard. Suddenly, this rock star person is now required to account for their every minute, basically. When can I be here? When can I leave? Is lunch acceptable here? How long can I go? Can I schedule a meeting? Can I invite anyone I want, or are there particular people? Oh, by the way, who can I talk to? Who can't I talk to? Can I spend some money? They are virtually now just hands tied and can't think for themselves in any way. That same rock star person that you courted and found and brought in is completely frustrated, and so are you. We looked at this and we thought, what team would draft a coveted all-star quarterback and then on day 1 say, oh, by the way, you're not going to be able to call any of the plays. You know, in fact, for the first 6 months, we think we'd rather that you just sit on the bench. This is not how you win games. It doesn't make sense in football. It doesn't make sense in business. So we looked at this objectively and we thought, what if this whole idea, this whole thing we do repeatedly, what if we have just been telling each other this thing and the emperor is wearing no clothes? This is not really the way to run business. It doesn't make sense. What if instead we followed our guts and we just decided to do the thing that really does make sense to us? So we did that. And I can tell you that over time, we discovered this really wonderful secret, which, if we all agree that the emperor really is naked, it's not such a secret, but that there is such freedom in power, in autonomy, and that people really do love and can be free adults. At Dynamic Events and Hub both, we have discovered this amazing synchronicity between autonomy and responsibility, and the balance between the two when everyone is free to enjoy it. And this is something that all of our team members do enjoy now. So how did we do it? Well, you know what they say, that Rome was not built in a day, and this is so true. If you are taking a traditionally hierarchical organization, particularly one that's struggling with a really lousy culture, and try to transform it into this wonderful, singing on the top of the hills, adulting world, it doesn't happen in a day. So the four of us really went at it. We started studying. We read books. We talked to other organizations who had implemented self-managed teams, either in part or in whole. Sometimes it just happens in a team. Sometimes it's a whole organization. And we even brought in a trainer from the Self-Management Institute. There really is such a place. And we learned so much, and we started talking about it with our team members in conversations at the water cooler and just having these ideas bubbling up, and we were so enthusiastic. And something really incredible happened. Our people were freaked out. They were completely panicked. They were themselves having water cooler conversations and happy hour powwows and saying, okay, if we're all going to do this, then there's no bosses. And if there's no bosses, then who's going to run everything? And if no one's running it, how are we going to make decisions? This is horrible. We hate this idea. And what we realized was that even though we knew that our team members were not at all enamored with their powerless positions in this kind of toxic environment we had, sometimes the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. And what we failed to do was give them all of the arsenal of information and knowledge and passion that we had about it. So our lesson number one was bring them on the journey with you, but also share the information. So we did just that. We had a full-on all-day workshop. Everyone stopped, the whole company together, and we talked about all of the things that were myths or misconceptions, what it was, what it wasn't, and then we did finally get our cart back on the horse where it belonged. And so what I'm going to share with you today is some of that definition that we went through, and then some of the things we employed to actually enact self-managed teams. So the first thing we did was we talked through what were the things that people thought self-managed teams was versus what it really is. The first and foremost myth or misconception about self-managed teams is that there is no structure, management, or leadership. We are all going to be wandering around aimlessly without direction, virtually on the verge of falling off a cliff. And that is not how leadership works in self-managed teams. There absolutely is leadership in self-managed teams. And I want to say that I am really happy there's an Incredibles 2 because my slide is relevant again. It was a little dated there for a while. In self-managed teams, leadership occurs naturally and according to expertise and responsibility. So in The Incredibles, when a crisis occurs, the superhero with the most pertinent superpower is the one who immediately jumps to the forefront and begins handling it, right? Everyone else rallies in behind using their powers as are appropriate. Crisis averted. Next crisis comes up, different superhero may be at the forefront, and it happens automatically, naturally. This is the nature of leadership in self-managed teams. It's the same as it is in life, and we repeat this to ourselves again and again. You know, there's no such thing as work-life balance. We just happen to be living some of our life here. That is exactly so. However you manage outside of work is the same inside work. Leadership is no different. We definitely have leadership roles, people who, based on their experience and expertise and knowledge, will do something different than another. It's naturally occurring, though, and it makes sense to everyone. The next myth is that everyone is equal. This was something that was hard concept to communicate. In this scenario, every single one of those bulbs is absolutely equal. They all draw the same amps, use the same volts, and deliver the same amount of light. For all intents and purposes, they are absolutely equal. The equality of self-managed teams is more like this, where everyone gives and takes as is appropriate to their unique role. So that street lamp is drawing the amps and using the volts to deliver what light it needs to fulfill its purpose. Yes? The desk lamp is doing exactly the same thing. drawing all the amps and using the watts it needs to deliver the light that it must to fulfill its unique role. They are absolutely equal in that regard. They both have just as much power as they need to fulfill their purpose. That is the equality of self-managed teams. Another myth is that it's about empowerment. This is something that we often use as a very positive term, and it is positive in so many ways. But empowerment implies that one person holds all the power and doles out a measure of power to someone else. And we all know that in the real world, what is given can be taken right back away, and that's not very powerful, is it? So in self-managed teams, everyone already has as much power as they need. It's not doled out to them, they simply walk in with it. Self-management is power. This is another good one. This one freaked out our event planning teams, was that decisions are made by consensus. And the concern was there's going to be a question on the table, and it's going to go around and around and around, and we will never come to an agreement. We will just agree to make a meeting to talk about again and go around and around and around because we know ourselves well enough. That is not the case. In self-managed teams, individuals absolutely what we call own the D. But they do determine who it is. We have an entire process built out for teams to walk through all the decisions that they make to decide among themselves who is the most appropriate person to make that decision, and then to give that person decision rights. That person has responsibility to check it against what the world might call stakeholders. We call them either influencers or interested persons, people who want to have their voice heard in the decision-making process, but ultimately, we do have a person who makes the decision. Otherwise, you're right, we would never get anywhere. Not cool. Those were the primary myths. There are some very important and distinct differences between self-managed teams and a traditional hierarchical organization. In a traditional hierarchical organization, titles indicate position and authority. We absolutely still have titles in our organization, but this is not their purpose. No one with a title in our organization has any more power or authority than another. They may have power over what they have decision rights over, but in a self-managed team organization, it is roles rather than titles. We recognize titles serve their purpose, but it is not an internal purpose. It's an external purpose. So a lot of our team members, when they come on, we ask them, what title do you think would give you the most strength and power outside of our environment when you're talking to clients or vendors? And they'll tell us, and we'll go, that's your title, that's who you are. It doesn't matter to us what that title is. We also know that titles have some power and strength. We don't expect our team members to be with us forever. On their resume, if they want a really great and powerful title, we are more than happy to give that title, because why not? More power to you, go. But the title internally doesn't get you anything. The next one is that employees report to managers. We don't have managers. In fact, we don't even really use the word employees. We use team members or colleagues because we do believe that words are very powerful and formative and that we speak ourselves into existence. That's a whole another topic we could get into. But to call someone employee or a manager gives an implication of a power play, right? In self-managed teams, people manage commitments, not other people. So you will make a commitment to work with someone, and if that commitment is missed, that's what you're managing. So we don't hear things like, geez, you know, last week I noticed that you were coming in at 3:30 every day, and then you took like this really long lunch, and what up? That is so irrelevant. That has nothing to do with anything. What you might hear is, last week you were going to give me that report by end of day Wednesday, and I had this client call on Thursday morning, and I didn't have the data I needed because I didn't get that from you, and we didn't really look very good to the client. What happened there? Okay, that's managing a commitment. Big difference. The next one, and I love this, is in a traditional hierarchical organization, sometimes they even call it this, issue escalation, where you get to take your issue and you march it up to someone on a higher floor and you get to dump it in their lap and say, well, that is that, and you throw up on them and say, okay, I am so glad that I got rid of that. I hope they finish that in a week. In self-managed teams, we acknowledge there is no one on the other side of that fence. We are all on the same side of the fence. And so if there's an issue, you own it. It's your own. You're an adult here, just like you are. You know, Julie Andrews up there on the hill singing. You're that adult, so when now you have a challenge, you still own it. We do have lots of tools and training on radical candor and conversations and putting your care in context and learning how to address as a team, as an individual, to manage your own issues. But I have to tell you, since we transitioned to self-managed teams, and we've been doing it for now on 3 years, we have so few issues. Because people have learned that you just kind of handle this stuff as it goes along. Nothing builds up into this big crescendo to where they dump it over the fence. They all know. There's nobody over there. The next one is that management in a hierarchical organization will determine how objectives will be achieved. In this scenario, this guy's a conductor, yes? He's telling them what they're playing, when they start, who comes in, at what point, who stops, who's louder, who's quieter, the time that you're playing it in, and then stop. He tells them everything. He tells them how to do it. And there is a time and a place for beautiful orchestra music. We love it. However, the alternative is where individuals and teams get to determine the how. And we love this option. We feel like this is the option of innovation. So this team still knows the what. They know what the song is. They know in what time it's played. And they know how it begins and ends. Everything else, free game. And we love the drum solos that come out of this and all of the other cool music. Yes, we love an orchestra. It has its place. I think of healthcare organizations particularly. You don't want the LPN coming in and going, last week I kind of really honed up on my skin disease diagnoses, and I think I'm going to be the one to call them this week because last week I got it right every time. It's like, that's not how that works. You want someone conducting that kind of work. But in self-managed teams and in the work that we do, we found that the freedom and innovation by allowing our team members to decide how they do what they do is invaluable. Final difference is that in a hierarchical organization, it automatically promotes this us versus them culture. Anytime you have one group of people doling out or delivering to another group of people, it is just going to happen. It cannot be stopped. In self-managed teams, we freely acknowledge that we are still all on the same side of the fence. We're all on the same side of that rope, too. We are all pulling for the same thing. We are mission-driven. We all want the same outcomes, and we know that we all own it and are responsible for it. And so it is definitely a we. When you walk into our organization, there's no question we are in this together. So from all of this kind of understanding of what self-managed teams is and what it isn't, and definitions about the differences, we drew from all of this and came and kind of honed it down to our primary tenets. These are our core beliefs about self-managed teams and what we value about it. No action or process or any activity will be enacted if it does not support one of these three primary tenets. The first of them being, our mission is our boss. We do not have a traditional org chart. You know the one I'm talking about, where the people at the top in the bigger boxes are clearly, you can see who has the most power, the most autonomy, the most freedom, the most decision-making rights, and then everyone else basically who's not those people. We feel like the message of an org chart is to tell you who you work for. And I don't know about you, but I don't work for another person. I work for me. I know what motivates me. I know what I want out of my work. And yes, I do work for a paycheck, and most of us do, but I can do that anywhere. And I think that all of our colleagues can do the same. So we don't have an org chart. We have created this mantra. I've said it before, and we say it to each other all the time because our words are powerful. And we speak into existence the fact that people do not manage people, people manage commitments. So all of the little periphery is what we call it. We don't care about the periphery. What time you came in, whether you're working in a coffee shop, whether we're wearing board shorts or flip-flops. In fact, we have a team-created handbook. Our teams wrote the whole thing. They designed it. They even published it. It's our team handbook, and it basically talks about how we do what we do. Here's our dress code. I'll let you read that for a second. So, our teams put this together. They talked about, as teams, should we have a dress code? And where they all kind of laughed, like, we don't really have a dress code. I mean, like, if you're wearing clothes, and then we're like, okay, that's it. So they put it together. The idea is that when people are left to be the adults that they are anywhere in life, they will be. So, we don't really need a dress code. You got clothes on, you're good. So that kind of leads to our next primary tenet, which is individuals have autonomy, latitude, and ownership. There's that balance. They get all this freedom, but then they have all this responsibility. But we know, you and I can do it. Anyone can do it. So it's not a us, them, should we let them? It's just we. Hey, we can do this. Everyone in our organization has this. They love it. And sometimes when they come in new, they don't believe it. But when you get someone who catches on and realizes what they've got, they sometimes just skyrocket. Meet Bree. Bree is in our customer success tech team, and she is considered in the industry junior or kind of entry level in her role. She started with us 6 or 7 months ago. But Bree, when she came, she heard what she did in orientation about self-managed teams, and she was just like, oh, I am on that. And she completely revamped how her customer success tech team operates. Designed some processes, talked about how we can communicate with clients, even created some conduits between other teams that hadn't already existed. Bree absolutely exemplifies our next and final primary tenet, which is leadership provides the what and team members provide the how. She knew what the objectives were. She knew what our mission was. She knew where we wanted to be. And she's just like, okay, here's how we're going to get there. And she gave it, and we were thrilled. This is work that a manager now didn't have to do, because someone who's on the boots on the ground level, doing that hard work, who knows the best solution, is there, eager to provide it because they know that they can. So I have shared with you lots of kind of big philosophical methodology kind of information. It's time to get right down to the details of how can you share or implement self-managed teams in your organization. And I'll just tell you a little bit of the things we did. The very first thing we decided to enact, because we felt like, how can we impress upon everyone that they do have this freedom? And we feel like a person's time speaks most to their feeling of autonomy and having freedom. So what we rolled out was unlimited PTO and a work from home policy. And this was, of course, a big hit, but I have to tell you, it was a very iterative process for us over the years, because in our first year, this was a hot mess. We had people taking way more time than was appropriate and we could manage, and others who were afraid to even ask because they were so used to having an accrual, they didn't feel like they owned any time off and they didn't want to do it. So we had to work very hard to put some process around how we worked our PTO and work from home. This is I'm not going to give you the 10 reasons why event planner is the toughest job in the world. I just found this on a blog, and it was just way too appropriate. It just totally sums up what an event planner's life is like. So I work with a whole army of event planners, and I can tell you, event planner is in the top 5 most stressful occupations on the Forbes Inc. list year over year. It's Army General, Surgeon, Firefighter, and then event planner. And it just seems so bizarre, but event planner has to put together this whole orchestra of tiny little details coming in an email and spreadsheets and phone calls and late nights, and it all has to come together in this one perfect shining moment in a very public way. Tyler, Andrew, Colin, can I get a witness? Yeah, okay? It's hard, hard work. This is a chart you may recognize. Here's our happiness score in dynamic events. In this time of September, October, November, our most colossal event occurs. And it is during this time that our happiness crashed. We knew it happened every year because it's a crazy event, and every single year we would lose really good, skilled people who just said, I cannot do this anymore. But we didn't know until we had Tiny Pulse, and it showed us graphically in all its glory what that looked like, and it kind of shocked us awake, and we were like, oh my gosh, we have got to be less demand-driven, and we've got to be more data-driven. How can we do this? So this was another thing we handed over to our teams. We showed them this and said, we know you just lost some good colleagues. Help, what do we do? And what they decided to do was put together some tools for gathering data. They deliver now this report to every team member on the services and event planning team every week. They put in a software to gather this data. So it's above is what you're seeing is actual hours worked, for average for the month, every week, and forecasted hours, what they think they're going to be working based on the workload coming up. And on the bottom is PTO that they've taken and what they have planned by person. In a traditional hierarchical organization, to put something up like this up or to hand it out to everyone would be an absolute no-no because people's names are on it. However, our team members know that they are not managing each other. They're managing their commitments, and it's important data, and if we're going to get somewhere and do something, we have to know this. So they very easily volunteered to just deliver the data and look at it. It was a non-issue. We didn't even talk about the fact that people's names were on it. This is not the wall of shame. This is the wall of productivity. So what we were able to do from this is have people see who was overburdened, who had time. They started cross-training to balance and level the load. Also, who was taking time off, who needed it, who didn't, balance that out a little bit. And it also helped us make decisions on hiring so that we didn't have anyone overloaded and we could support them. If you look now, this is the year following. During that same time period, the same event, and I can tell you it was every bit as grueling as it always is. It's an event of like 30,000 attendees over 5 days. It's massive. We did not have a dip. In fact, we had a little bit of a bump near the end because everyone was like, oh, woohoo, we did it. And we didn't lose anyone in that year. Amazing. So part of the solution was hiring more people in the right places because we figured out where we needed them. And hiring is, yes, another thing that we turned over to our teams. This is also from our team-created handbook, which talks about how we hire. I find it a little amusing that they put in the handbook that you don't interview with the HR department because we don't have an HR department. We have what's called a foundation team, but I think they're speaking to candidates to say, you know, hey, you're going to be talking to us, team members. When we have an interview coming up, we invite every single team member. It could be up to 20 people. They collaborate, they talk about who's going to go, who's not going to go. They organize it, they interview to culture fit, and it's successful. We've never had an interview where people didn't show up. We've never had an interview, well, I wouldn't say we haven't had one with too many. We've had a lot of people, but those just turned into like fun parties. So it's a process that works. The last process we handed over was in regard to budget. We spend a lot of money on morale and on fun, and we decided who better to determine how that money gets spent than our teams. So we did the thing that we talk about where leadership provides the what. We said, here's the what. Here's how much money you get. Here's the things that we want to see out of that money. We want 4 celebrations. We do quarterly celebrations. And we want a winter party. Other than that, it's your money, it's your morale. You figure it out. What are we going to do? How are we going to spend it? And so we had a volunteer morale committee who spends all that money every year for everyone. And to the delight of the leadership team, we don't have to do it. And we end up with something far better than if we had sat there, and thought about what we were going to do for every quarterly celebration and every party and every coffee Friday or kombucha or whatever. Yeah, we have a kombucha tap now, by the way, because that was something they wanted to have. You go. So these are some of the tactical things that we used. But I want to give you some words of advice here at the end. Before you hand the keys of the kingdom over to your teams, if you are considering self-managed teams or even self-managed team in a department, it is absolutely crucial that your leadership team in that area is all together and all in on this. You have to have the hard conversations early and often. You have to decide what it is, what it isn't to you, how you want to include your teams, how you're going to communicate it to your teams. If you think that our team members were freaked out about self-managed teams, it's nothing compared to what people who are already in those traditional positions of authority, managers or directors, will feel about it when you start having the conversation, because it does feel like a threat if they don't understand it well enough. And I can say that if you are the CEO or are you in a C-suite position, you are probably going to be the most likely point of failure for self-managed teams in your organization, and there's a very good reason for that. You are in the position you are in because you are that amazing rock star employee, and you were from the beginning. You were the one who figured out when you were young and just in the workforce how to do things, what not to do, how to do it best. You worked your way up the ranks into the position you are now, as you should. And it is for that reason that it is so very hard to then turn the reins over to some young, inexperienced, overconfident, relative punk in your customer success tech team who thinks she knows more than she possibly could. However, if you take those reins back even once or twice, you're going to reverse so much of that positive momentum. So you turn the reins over, and what happens? They fail, maybe, probably, but how did you and I figure out the best way to do what we do is over time, we did it the wrong way. So you know that the thing you just did? Don't do that. That's how you learn. It's that simple, and you let it happen. And I can assure you, in my experience of the last 3 years, that these major colossal failures happen so rarely in reality, and when there's a failure, it is not nearly as devastating as you expect it might be. You also must relentlessly give things over to your teams. I can't tell you how many times we agonized as a leadership team of 4 what to do with a problem, and then we finally come to the end of ourselves and go, oh, wait, self-managed teams, let's give it to the team. And then we would agonize again over how much do we give them, how much do we withhold, how much information, are we transparent, do we hide this data point? When we finally handed things over to them and let them put their powerful hands on the same side of the rope with us and pull, that heavy weight moved along with relative ease. It was such a surprise and delight, and it is that kind of paradox that you set something free and it comes back to you kind of thing. It's true. You let it go, you let them help you pull, and it will happen. Well, on behalf of my teams, Dynamic Events and Hub, I am so grateful to have had this opportunity to share this with you. It is my delight and my passion. I have a bit of information that will go out with a slide deck that you will be welcome to, and of course, feel free to reach out to me directly. I am happy to have this conversation with anyone. It's something I love to discuss, so thank you very much.
All right, yes, thank you so much, Nancy. I know we're a bit over. We do have a half-hour networking session right after this, just out in the hallway, so no worries there. But I wanted to run by you the top 2 questions that were asked by the crowd through the Q&A, just to get your thoughts. The first one was, with self-managed teams, what if you have multiple alphas? Does it just work itself out? Is there conflict? What's your experience or your advice in that situation?
And by multiple alphas, am I understanding it to mean positions of authority or leadership? Is that? Yeah.
Personalities, I think, really, because if you get rid of roles,
strong personalities, yes, yeah. You know, it's not a bad thing to have a strong personality. We definitely have strong personalities. What it comes down to is agreements. People make team agreements, and so that is part of our process and how we work. And once you've made an agreement with someone else, you and they are bound to it, and they can be as strong and powerful in personality and impress as they want to be, but when you have an agreement, that now you're holding each other to a commitment. So it really does all come down to those team and individual agreements.
Understood. I mean, this is fascinating, and please do fill out the feedback forms for Nanci and for us before you leave. But last question would be for the audience, if people are interested in the topic of self-management or potentially doing it with their organizations, what books, blogs specifically do you recommend? You had a couple of resources at the end in your previous slide.
Yeah, we'll go back to that.
Anything to highlight before you share out this deck with folks?
You know, truly, it is, if you Google self-managed teams, or look at Morningstar, that's a tomato processing plant. They've been doing self-managed teams for over 30 years now. Another company is called Semler, S-E-M-L-E-R, in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Their CEO has just celebrated his 31st year of not making a decision. That's kind of how they run. Both great examples. Also, the book Beyond Empowerment. It's about self-managed teams. Very easy read in kind of a story format. Great, easy book to kind of get the concept. Reinventing Organizations, much more condensed, thick. If you're that data analyst type, it's full of information, more textbook-like, but all good information. So,
great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Nanci. One more round of applause for Nanci. Thank you.